for joining us this afternoon. My name is Chadwick Blue. I'm a project coordination manager here at the Broward MPO, and I help manage the Mobility Hubs program for the MPO. And so today we're going to go through a short presentation. I'll be doing a short PowerPoint that gives an overview of the Mobility Hubs program, and then we will also get into how to fill out the online application. I also have Benjamin Restrepo here, who is an engineer on staff at the Broward MPO. He will be assisting with the cost estimate section of the application. And so with this, why don't we just go ahead and jump on in here. So first of all, I always like to start off with what exactly is a mobility hub. And so as defined by the Broward MPO, it's an existing transit access point with high concentrations of transit activity, whether that be trip generation or trip transfer, in areas of high development or potential redevelopment. And so this picture to the right is Northwest 2nd Street in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And we recently completed a $3.5 million Mobility Hubs project. And this is the after. So you can see like what a tremendous effect a Mobility Hub could have in your area. And I'll speak a little bit about the improvements later on and the potential improvements that you can seek for your community. So again, the purpose of the Mobility Hub is to offer Mobility Hub master plan studies and also design and construction funds through competitive grant programs, similar to CSLIP or the existing PTAP programs, if you're familiar at all with the existing programs that the Broward MPO offers. Today, we're going to go through the Mobility Hub process. We're going to do a high level on that. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll get into the online application and I'll sort of walk you through that. And then at the end, we'll have a section in time for any questions or comments that anyone may have. In addition to that, this is also being recorded. So this will be put on our website for your benefit to view later on. So this slide right here shows a typical Mobility Hub process. And what it starts off with is first you have your application development, and that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. Once that's done, you'll submit your application. It'll come to us. MPO staff will evaluate that, and then we will provide a recommendation for approval and ranking that will then go before the Broward MPO board for award and approval. And so that kind of sets the stage for how this works. The evaluation criteria, this slide right here shows exactly what we're looking for in terms of evaluation criteria. So previously, the MPO board had approved some criteria as part of the Hubs Revisited 2.0. All of this documentation is available on our website, the Broward MPO's website. It's browardmpo.org. And our focus is essentially on network readiness, market readiness, and sponsor readiness. And again, we try to tie these themes back into the themes that are in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And those include mobility, accessibility, safety, equity, environmental stewardship, and economic vitality. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in the next slide. So this is the point system and how the applications will be ranked. The applications themselves are based out of 110 points. And so each of these categories, you'll see the various points that you can get in them. And once we get into the online application, it'll make even more sense to you when you're looking at this. But essentially, all these different things, besides walkability, which is right here under accessibility, everything else we're looking at things within a quarter mile of your proposed project. And so for equity, you can see we look at we have an equity assessment score. We look at transit dependent populations. For many of you, you may be familiar with zero car household census data. We look at that. Moving down to accessibility, you see that we look at your community facilities within the quarter mile radius, your transit stops, your schools. That walkability score, that's based on your zip code. So that's a little bit different. But again, there's a walkability score that's put together by the EPA that defines the accessibility and the ease and facilities that are within a zip code. Moving down to economic vitality, you see we look at MTP key activity centers, we look at employment and residential density. And then moving down to network readiness, starting with mobility, you see we look at transit service, the routes, the ridership in your area. We also look at safety information, including crash data, vehicular and non-vehicular accidents, and anything that's occurring along a high injury network. Again, those of you who are familiar with CSLIP, a lot of this is carryover and mirrors CSLIP. So it should be familiar with those of you who have put together applications in the past for CSLIP. In addition to that, we also look at environmental stewardship things like extreme weather, climate change risk to the transportation system in Broward County. And so all of these things, this category over here for the points, this is the maximum number of points that you can get in any given category here. Moving down to sponsor readiness, many of you have heard about program ready, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the next slide, but I want you to understand that this is the only category that you can actually score a negative 10 points or negative points. And again, I'll explain a little bit more coming up here. So for sponsor readiness, what we're looking at is essentially we're looking at transit supportive practices. And so that means, do you have community support for your project? Are your land use policies, are they in line with what you're proposing to do for Mobility Hub? Do you have any sort of public-private partnerships that you're willing to showcase in this area as well? And then also local projects or local funding. Is the member board applicant willing to put any funds of their own into this project? We look at all of those things and there's a score assigned to those. And so the last thing is a project delivery for past 3 years of MPO funded projects. And so what we're looking at is, has your municipality or your member board government, have they delivered on MPO funded projects? If you haven't done anything with the MPO in the last 3 years, that's okay. You're not going to get any points. It's just 0. If you have successfully delivered a project in the last 3 years, you'll get 2 points. And if you have received MPO funding, but you failed to deliver a project in the past 3 years, you'll actually get a deduction of negative 10 points. And it's not because we want to be mean or punitive, but we want to strike home the fact that we're using FTA funds for these projects. And so there's a lot of work that goes into programming it on the FTA side in order to get the funds released to you. So we just want to make sure that we have a willing partner who understands the risks and the responsibilities that they need to undertake in order to deliver a successful project. And I will show some more information in a later slide that you can actually go and look at our evaluation chart and get a lot more detail, but I'll show that later. So right now, this slide is what a typical Mobility Hubs process looks like. So as I mentioned before, there are 2 different funding options. There's Mobility Hub Master Plan, and then there's design and construction. So if you come to the MPO and you're seeking funding for Mobility Hub Master Plan, that's essentially going to be these 2 things in the beginning, the planning framework and the master plan. And so what that entails is there's an evaluation of existing transportation infrastructure that's done. There's a context analysis. Many times there's a market analysis. Doesn't always have to be the case, but we find that many of our municipalities really want a market analysis done as well to understand what exactly the market around the Mobility Hub can support. And from that, there's value capture, and then there's public outreach that's done. We go out and meet with the public, try and find out what they envision for this area too, because it's one thing for the applicant to come in with an idea, but we really want to make sure that the public and the communities that are impacted are behind the project. All of those things in the planning framework then lead into the master plan development, which is design concepts essentially. And also it includes implementation strategies, and then any sort of NEPA clearance or documentation that we need. That'll also be identified in the master plan. And so at that point, if you've done the master plan or you have an equivalent study that you can point to that highlights your transportation needs, then you can essentially move into design construction, which are these next three tabs here. And so you've got 30% design, you've got final design, and then project completion. And so within 30% design, that includes right-of-way permit research, any traffic studies you may need, warrant studies, and then typically that generates 30% conceptual designs along with cost estimates. From there, you move into your final design and construction. So this includes, at this point, you'll have to enter into a subrecipient agreement with the Broward MPO. And this outlines the roles and responsibilities of both the member board government who's applying for the funding, but also outlines what the MPO is going to do as well. And so those are outlined in the agreement. Once that's done, there's an FTA approval process. All of the funds have to go through TRAMS, which is the Transit Management Award Management System that FTA has. It's an online application that MPO staff will fill out on behalf of the member board government who is applying for Mobility Hub funding. Typically, this process could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, but it's essential that we get clearance from FTA in order to release the funds to you as the applicant. And then as part of that, there's also an implementation strategy that's further developed from the implementation strategy here in the master plan. And then as you move through your project, you've done the construction, you're in completion, there's still some continuing control measures that need to be taken care of. There's an annual reporting to the National Transit Database, which I'll speak to a little bit more later on. And also, the member board applicant is responsible for maintaining the assets that are funded with Mobility Hub funds for their useful life. So that's always very important to remember, because it's, I wish that we could just complete the project and wipe our hands clean, but there's always something that continues later on, and the city or the applicant is still on the hook for maintaining those useful life of those assets. So moving on, again, the program funding, you have two different options. The phase one is a Mobility Hub master plan. And so if you choose to do a Mobility Hub master plan, the MPO will lead this effort in partnership with the applicant. There is a maximum amount of $400,000 for any Mobility Hub master plan studies. Not a minimum, but there is a maximum. And so say you already have that, you've already completed that, or again, you have some sort of equivalent transportation study that you've done. You can move forward and request funding for design and construction. So at this point, we expect that the applicant will lead that. There's also a potential to use the Metro Transportation Engineering and Constructive Cooperative. I know that's a big mouthful, but we call it MTEC. This is the project delivery arm of the Broward MPO, and we're in the process of setting this up. So it's always a possibility for you to use that. But at the same time, they're filling up with all kinds of projects, and you can't necessarily bank on being able to use MTEC, but it is an option there for you. It's something we'd like you to keep in mind moving forward. The minimum for design and construction is $1 million. Now, we've set that because, again, as I mentioned previously, there are a lot of steps that need to be taken place behind the scenes in order to advance this money. And as I mentioned previously, there's an application process that has to go through the FTA, and it's fairly lift heavy. So we want to make sure we have at least $1 million worth of capital to fund through that. Now, there's no maximum, but there is a minimum. As I mentioned earlier, both phases require that FTA approval through TRAMS. Typically, it's a 3 to 6 month process, but it is something that we like everyone to be aware of, because as we try to make this as seamless and as quick as possible, there are some steps that need to be taken, and some of it has to do with our transportation partners in Washington and Region 4. So moving forward, what are some of the eligible activities? So we're using Section 5307 funds, which are our FTA funds. And eligible activities include planning, engineering, designing, and evaluation of transit projects. This is essentially your mobility hub master plans, your planning studies. Moving through that, in addition to the planning studies, we can also fund these capital items such as bus shelters, streetscape items, including benches, streetlights, trash receptacles, pedestrian access and walkways, bicycle paths, bicycle lanes, bicycle storage. In addition to that, multi-use paths, pedestrian scale crossing, pedestrian lighting, transit signage. Now, I'd like to, keep a pause here. People see signage and they think it can mean any number of things. It has to be transit related. And so we've had applicants in the past come to us with very interesting concepts, and they've had ideas of signage that include wayfinding signage for example, for their museums in their downtown. And while we encourage that and we think that's an awesome idea, it's not necessarily transit related. So you have to remember the transit signage. It's got to tie back into transit, to your community shuttles or your Broward County buses or something like that. And then in addition to that, any sort of enhanced access for people with disabilities for public transportation is absolutely something that we can use our mobility hub funds for. And so the next slide here, this talks about the Federal Transit Administration compliance. And so because we're using FTA funds, there's a number of compliance requirements for them. And so the mobility hub master plans, the phase 1, you don't necessarily as an applicant need to worry too much about your compliance issues, because the MPO is going to handle that themselves. We're going to lead those mobility hub master plans ourselves. We're kind of dealing with all the compliance issues. But if you do choose to move into design and construction, that's something where, again, either use MTech or the city or applicant themselves lead that. And there's a number of things that you need to keep in mind during that. And so the first and foremost is that third-party procurement procedures need to be followed. And that means there needs to be full and open competition. So again, no short bids. We like at least 30 days for the bid to stay open. And again, just needs to follow that full and open competition. If you're familiar, if your procurement office has been following Florida state law, which I'm sure they have for all your procurements, you're 99% there. But there are some additional things that you may not have had to deal with in the past. And one of those is FTA Buy America. So we have to make sure that the steel and the iron and all the things that are involved in construction are Buy America. And in addition to that, we also need to make sure that we follow Davis-Bacon prevailing wage. Now, this is something that's set by the Department of Labor. It's updated several different times a year, maybe more, but it's a wage determination, again, set by DOL for various contractors that you may be dealing with, electricians, any type of contractor like that. There's a wage that the Department of Labor sets, and you need to make sure that you are at least meeting that minimum wage. In addition to that, you need to follow disadvantaged business enterprise, DBE. The Broward MPO has an overall goal of 7% of the project needs to go to a DBE. So we're really, really looking to meet that goal with every project that we undertake. And if we can't meet that for some reason, we need to make sure we document it and we say exactly why we couldn't. So very important to remember that because again, if you're ever involved in a triannual audit or anything with the FTA, they're going to come back and they're going to look at these things. So we want to make sure that we take care of them in the beginning so that there's no headaches later on. In addition to that, there's a lot of Title VI compliance that needs to be maintained, and also any ADA, Americans with Disability Act. Any compliance issues with that need to be followed, as well as equal employment opportunity, EEO. Many of you may be familiar with that, but again, like all of these things, MPO staff are here to assist you with over the course of the project. So if you're not familiar with them now, we expect you to be once the project is delivered, and we're here to help you. But again, we need to make sure that you have your eyes wide open going into the project, knowing what's expected of you. In addition to the aforementioned items, there's also reporting requirements. There's monthly reporting, and then there's also quarterly reporting that's due. The monthly reporting comes to the MPO. The quarterly reporting actually goes to the FTA as part of the TRAMS application that we developed for the project. In addition to that, there's an annual national transit database reporting that is also required. I believe it's due in January 30th of each year for the previous year. And so during the course of the project, we offer training, and we have a lot of different resources that we can provide the applicant so that they're, sure that they're doing all of their reporting correctly. In addition to all of those items, again, we require that the maintenance of the project assets be done for their useful life. So we look at industry standards, all kinds of things. But again, for instance, a bus shelter needs to be maintained for its useful life. And the same with any other item like lighting, crosswalks, signage, they all have to meet their useful life. And if they're not, if for some reason the city cannot or the applicant cannot manage these items for the useful life, the cost for those assets needs to be returned back to the FTA. So always something to keep in mind. It's a lot easier to manage them than to have to pay back the FTA later on. And lastly, record retention. You're required by the FTA to keep all of your project records for 3 years after your project closeout. Oftentimes we do it for much, much longer, but it has to be done for at least 3 years. So it's important to remember that in the beginning so that there's no issues later on. There's also additional requirements. And once we meet with you and review your application, we can sort of get into any other items that we might have not mentioned today in our presentation. But there's always compliance issues. But, again, we're here to help you. We're not trying to hurt you. We just, we want to help make the project as compliant as possible. And it's to everyone's benefit for them. So, all right, let's look at some important dates here. So the Mobility Hubs program, Cycle 1, is going to open up this afternoon at 3:30, shortly after this presentation. As part of the application, there is a pre-application meeting that is required. Again, very similar to the existing MPO programs, such as CSLIP or PTAP that you may be familiar with. But we do ask that you meet with us, and my contact information is here. It should be plastered all over on the website, but we do ask that you come and meet with us. We can do it virtually. It doesn't have to be in person, but we'd like to have sort of a high overview look at your project. And the reasoning behind this is just to make sure it's a good fit, because we have so many other different funding options available at the Broward MPO that we want to make sure that what you're proposing fits in with the Mobility Hubs program, and maybe not with an additional program that we have. And so with that being said, our submission deadline for Cycle 1 is February 28th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please don't come to me at 5:15 and say, you had a problem and begging for more time. Just, it's easier to get the applications done in advance. And this year, because it's our first year, we're offering even more time than when we would additionally do. I believe CSLIP typically offers 6 weeks of time. We're offering even more because we know it's the first year and there's going to be a lot of questions, and we want to make sure that you have as much time as needed to complete your application. So moving on, this slide right here, this shows a lot of important links. So all of the program information for the Mobility Hub application can be found here in this first link. And I will show you the documentation in that shortly. And then also the link below, that's where you'll go to start your cycle 1 application. Again, it won't be live until 3:30 this afternoon, but once it goes live, that's where you'll go and you'll fill everything out at. And so with that, let me jump in real quick to the, sorry here. Bear with me. I'm going to pull up here we go. So if you click on that link, this will take you to the program information for the Mobility Hubs project. Now, let's just say you don't have that link and you have to, you need to navigate on your own. Come to browardmpo.org. This is our homepage right here. And from here, I'll show you how to navigate through. So what you're going to do is you'll go to what we do. You'll go down to projects and studies. You'll hover over current projects and studies and click there. And so from there, you're going to scroll down a little bit and just click right down on Mobility Hubs there. And that's going to give you an overview. And so from here, you can see all of our past projects, the ones we're involved in. Many we have completed past Mobility Hub master plans. Some have gone into design and construction. You can come here, you can look, you can read. I really encourage you to familiarize yourself with this section of our website because it will answer a lot of the questions that you have. And so clicking on program information, this is going to take you to honestly the most important documents as you try to fill out your Mobility Hub application. So the first item, you've got the schedule. So I've gone through many of the dates already, but as I mentioned, the program opens up today on the 13th. Our applications will be due at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on February 28th, 2022. From that point on, we will be doing the project ranking and evaluation. And so those will be completed by April 11th. And then on April 27th, those will go before the TAC and the CAC. As recommended for their approval. Once that's done, they will go before the Broward MPO, who will meet on May 12th, and that's when they will be awarded. So that's just to give you a little overview on what the schedule is going to look like for you. Now moving back in here, whoops, sorry, I lost that page there. Let me get it back real quick. Bear with me 1 second. All right, so following with that, so we have an application checklist. So this is very beneficial to see what kind of documentation you're going to need. And so as you can see for phase 1, we list all of the stuff you need, like purpose and need that's required. You may have supporting data or a technical analysis that supports that. Great. If you have it, you can upload it. In addition to that, we require a project area map. We do require a resolution from the applicant's governing board for this specific project. And we have some sample resolution language that I will share momentarily with you, but that is something that we definitely need. So keep that in mind. In addition to that, you'll see any detailed public support. You can upload that, any documentation of coordination with other partners, especially if they're being impacted. You can upload that as well. Letters of support, additional ones from other partners, you can upload. As I mentioned before, for sponsor readiness, so documentation of supportive land use policies. There's a section in our application where that can be uploaded. Any sort of documentation for private-public partnerships, same thing. We have an area for that to be uploaded on the online application. And then moving down, any sort of locally funded projects that support multimodal transportation. We have a section where you can upload any information on that. And then your documentation of past delivery of MPO funded projects. Remember, this is the thing where we're looking back the last 3 years. Has the applicant member successfully delivered a project? Yes or no? And you know, you'll be assigned points based on that. And moving down here, say you've already done your mobility hub master plan, you want to move into design and construction. It's the same type of thing. We have a list of documentation down here. I won't read through each one of them. But for instance, one that is different is there's a completed Fdot cost estimate form. That's a requirement of phase 2. That's not a requirement of phase 1. So it's great to print these documents off. And as you're going through your application, just, you know, you can check these boxes, make sure you have them. And it just makes it that much easier for you when it comes time to filling out the online application. Now, down here again, there's some instructions about how we recommend doing it. As you can see down here from these screenshots, these are sample files where I've created a file folder and I've just put everything in there. So I know when I come time to do my online application, I have everything on my desktop and it's ready to roll. And so you can read a little bit more about this through this documentation on our website. In addition to that, there's an evaluation criteria. So I went through that earlier. So this right here, this shows you all the stuff we're looking at. And it shows you the scoring details associated with it. So as you go through your online application, if you want to understand how you're going to be ranked even more, this is the document you're going to turn to. And it's going to give much more information than what was cursory explained. And you can scroll through it. You can see exactly where you're going to be, you know, ranked on, and the scoring thresholds that we'll be looking at. Again, everything is out of 110 points. And as I mentioned previously, everything on here, besides sponsor readiness and besides walkability, we're looking at a quarter mile of all of the stuff around the proposed mobility hub location. So it's definitely to your advantage to get in here and sort of read this so that you're familiar with how you will be ranked. Very similar again to CSLIP. There's overlap. There's sections that are very different, but there is overlap too. So if you're familiar with that process, it shouldn't be that much different. Now moving back, we also have a sample application. So essentially you could download this document and you could start to fill it out yourself. You'll see as you go through, it's essentially everything that's going to be asked of you on the online application, but in a Word document form. So for myself, I find it easier to download something like this and to fill out the various questions. And then that way I know that I'm ready once I get into the online application, because I literally just come in here, I copy things and paste them into the application. So again, another great resource for you as you're moving through the application. Similar to CSLIP and PTAP again. Let me move back a little bit here. As I mentioned, we require we require resolution language. And so if you're doing a mobility hub master plan, we have sample language for your commission and for you to look at. We realize it's kind of a lot to have to go and run around and do resolutions of support. So we wanted to help as best we could by offering you a template and some sample language that you can take and then change as you see fit based on the project you're proposing. But again, there's language there for you. So you don't really need to invent the wheel here. And it's the same down here for design and construction. There is sample language for what that resolution of support would look like as well. So trying to give you as many tools as possible to help you with a successful application, knowing that we're asking for a lot, but at the same time, all the information that you're needed is here. In addition to that, there's a candidate mobility hubs location map. I will talk about this in a minute once I get into the online application. Also, there's a sample sub-recipient agreement. As I mentioned, if you move forward with design and construction, this is an agreement that we would be looking to take to your commission or appropriate body that really outlines the roles of the various parties, you as the applicant and us as the MPO. We talk about, compliance issues. We talk about invoicing, all of, the good stuff, the devil's in the details. It's all in this subrecipient agreement. And so you can move through this and at your leisure. It's 28 pages long, but you'll see the type of stuff that we're looking for. And you'll understand once you start reading. It's fairly standard stuff, but again, we want to make sure you kind of understand as the applicant what's expected of you. So again, those roles and responsibilities are clearly laid out in this nice 28-page document. So coming back here, there is a cost estimate form. As I mentioned, Benjamin Restrepo, who is one of the Broward MPO's engineers, he's going to lead you through this. This is a requirement for design and construction. So we will get into that in a little bit greater detail momentarily. But again, all of this stuff is here for you. And the application itself is right underneath it. And so you could click this. Now, because we're not at that 3:30 mark, I don't believe, oh, actually it is open. So you could go in here. This is where you'll go to do your application itself. But again, just so you're aware, you come here to 2021, 2022 application, and this is where you will, you'll click on the link, and that's going to open up the online application. So with that, let me go ahead and just move into that very quickly. So this page right here is what it's going to look like once you start the online application. Again, I hate to keep harping back to CSLIP, but those of you who are familiar with CSLIP, it will look very familiar to you. And so just starting off, again, please read all instructions very carefully. It's important. Many of your questions will be answered through the documentation on our website, or actually through the first page of this application itself. And so moving down through that, all things with a red asterisk, those are required documentation. You need to make sure you have it. Because as you go through, and we'll see this in a moment, but the application itself won't even let you move forward unless you fill out the required fields. So always keep that in mind. There is a question limitation for text in certain boxes. So as we're moving through, you'll see that character limit. You just need to make sure that you're under that character limit. The application works best in Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox. Please do not use Microsoft Internet Explorer. We have major problems with it, and it's not going to work properly. So again, please use Google Chrome or Firefox, or I guess an equivalent to one of those, but do not use Internet Explorer. In addition to that, once you begin the application, you really need to complete it. This right here, this is a disclaimer to kind of cover our bases here. It should, in theory, save your work to where if you were on the same exact computer and you came back later on and opened up the same exact browser, in theory, your work would be there. But it's just easier for us to tell everyone just to complete it all at once. Some people have add-ons, like, they close their browser and the history is deleted or the cookies are deleted. If that's the case, you'll lose all your information. So it's just easier to sit down and complete it all at once. And it's easier because I had mentioned before, you have that blank application. So you essentially can fill that out, that you can save, you can take as much time as you want, and you can always use that as you're completing the online application. So something to keep in mind. Moving down through this, we start talking about, what is a mobility hub again? It's a focal point in the transportation network that seamlessly integrates different modes of transportation, multimodal supportive infrastructure, and placemaking strategies to create activity centers that maximize first and last mile connectivity. Again, want you to understand what you're applying for, what this program is about. We anticipate this being an annual cycle. As part of the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, we specify 10% of funds going to Mobility Hub funding. But again, it's always dependent on federal appropriations. So keep that in mind as always. Moving through the prioritization process, I had mentioned this earlier. We have links throughout the application that are just helpful links for you once you get in here, because I honestly don't think that you'll remember, half of this. So once you get into the application itself, we want to make sure that you can go back and forth with the information you want. So you could click on this. What I like to do is I like to right click and then open in a new tab. And then that way I keep the page that I'm on, but then I also get the information on a different tab. It's entirely up to you. You could click on it, but you see it takes you away from the page and you have to go back in order to get back to that first page. So up to you. I recommend right clicking, opening in a new tab. As I mentioned before, the evaluation criteria, that is all here. We're looking at market readiness, network readiness, and sponsor readiness. If you want to know even more about it, you can look at this evaluation chart to really understand how the scoring is going to work. And I really, really recommend that you do that so that there isn't any guessing going on. Moving forward, with the Mobility Hub application, it's an online application that's open to MPO member board governments. So anyone who sits on the MPO board can apply for funding. In addition to that, many of you are probably familiar with our program ready criteria. We try to use this for all of our projects, no matter where it is, whether it's CSLIP, PTAP, anything else. We all ask that they're program ready. So what that means, for Mobility Hub master plans, we're looking at a scope of work. You need a detailed scope of work. Obviously, you need to, know what you're proposing and what you're trying to do. In addition to that, we require partner collaboration. It's one thing to have the right of way be all city owned, and that's fine and dandy, but you may be impacting other facilities. So we want to make sure that everyone who's being impacted is on board with what's being proposed, because it takes care of 100 different headaches later on down the road. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, we look for resolution of support. It's very important. We have to have it. So please don't even bother filling out the application without your resolution of support. Moving down to program ready design and construction, all the same things as I mentioned before: scope of work, partner collaboration. Now, this is different. The cost estimate, that is only a requirement for design and construction. And we will go into that in much further detail momentarily, but keep that in mind. You need to have this cost estimate filled out. Lastly, again, resolution of support, that doesn't change. We need that. So now that we've gone through all of the verbiage here in the beginning, now we can start getting down into the questions themselves. So the first one is essentially just asking, have you read the program policies and the evaluation criteria and all supporting documentation? Now, again, we've got a link here. I'm just gonna, right click it, open in a new tab. It's all of the program information that we went through before. So it's really to your benefit to read through all of this all these different documents, because 9 times out of 10, the question you have is going to be in here. And just by familiarizing yourself with these documents, you will be aware of all of that. So we're going to go ahead and say agree. You'll see if you don't agree, it won't even let you move forward. So, you know, in a way, we're forcing your hand to read all the documentation. So we're going to say agree because we've read it. Now down here, it's talking about, did the applicant attend the required pre-application meeting? If you said no, you can't move forward. So again, please reach out to me to set that up. If for some reason I am not in the office or I can't be reached, Renee Cross or James Cromar, you can reach out to them and they can help set up this meeting. But I should be there 99% of the time, but just in case I'm not. So we're going to say yes, we've already done that. So let's move forward. So I have taken the liberty of filling out this online application. I'm using the Downtown Fort Lauderdale Mobility Hub project as my example here. And so as you see, it asks for a project name. You're going to give it a project name. I've called it, Downtown Fort Lauderdale Mobility Hub. And then below that, it's going to ask you which category are you seeking funding for? Is it a mobility hub master plan or is it design construction? We're going to go ahead with design construction, and I can come back later on and walk you through mobility hub master plan, but it's not too different. But you'll select one of the two, and then you'll move down. And so down here, we ask for a brief description of how the proposed mobility hub project meets the Federal Transit Administration's transit nexus. And so what that means is, how are you impacting the following three things? And so down here is a text box that you can fill out. Again, here's a character limit. As I mentioned before, some of the boxes are limited. And you can actually expand these boxes down too. Like, you can make them as small or as big as you want. And so I have filled out some information in here. You can see that it's a multi-block area that will connect various transportation choices. And then I go on to list the various transportation options that are available. So that ties into access that connects directly to public transportation, the second bullet point up here. So you need to find a way to then link back up here, tell us what you're doing, how it's going to benefit public transportation. You're going to list it down here. Once that's done, you will select the agency that you're applying on behalf. So I've selected City of Fort Lauderdale, but there's a whole drop down of many different ones. And you'll see down here, you can scroll through and find exactly who you are applying for. So we'll just go back there to City of Fort Lauderdale. This next question just asks, are you applying for multiple applications? Yeah, you're totally allowed to do that. This question just helps staff know what's sort of coming down to us. And so for the purposes of today, I've said, no, this is going to be the only application. So we'll move forward. So this page asks for, your submitter's name. So I've put my name, Chadwick Blue, in here. Now, ask for your email address. You'll put your email address down. You'll put your telephone number. So my telephone number is 954-876-0051. And I'm going to be the main point of contact moving forward. If not, you can say no if somehow you chose the short straw and you had to do the application, but you're not going to be the main contact. This is where you'll go ahead and you'll fill out that information. But since I'm the main point of contact, we'll go ahead and say yes. So this next item it talks about whether or not the applicant seeking mobility hub construction funding will be responsible for managing and administering the project through a subrecipient with the Broward MPO. We ask, is your agency willing to enter into this subrecipient agreement? Again, you can view the sample subrecipient agreement by clicking on the link. It'll open a different page up and you'll be able to see that as I showcased earlier. But again, it is a requirement. So if you say no, it won't let you move forward. So you need to understand that that is a requirement for you. So clicking on yes and moving forward. The next question is, the Broward MPO is working with member agencies to stand up a new organization called Metro Transportation Engineering and Construction Cooperative, MTEC. This, as I mentioned, is a possible delivery mechanism for the applicant. Instead of having to do the procurement, you could potentially have MTEC do it. And so this is just to gauge your interest. It is a pay-to-play service, and so there's a 5-year commitment, and it's $25,000 per year. So you need to understand that it's certainly not free. There is a commitment, but we just like to gauge your interest. So yes or no. I'm going to go ahead and say yes for this, that City of Fort Lauderdale would be interested in having MTEC deliver their project. And so moving forward, this gets you to this next page here. So this gets into kind of the facility map a little bit. And so this first question is, we asked just for the project boundaries. So the project boundaries for this project are Northeast 4th Street to the north, Broward Boulevard to the south, Andrews Avenue to the east, and the FEC Railroad Tracks to the west. And so you'll type in exactly where the project limits are in this box. Again, you can make the box bigger or smaller. All you have to do is click on down here and you can expand the box. Now down in this map will let you select any point, and you can, you can put a point on the map. And then remember, the evaluation criteria is going to look at where you put a point on the map, and we're going to look at a 1/4 mile radius around here. So for my purposes, I'm going to move it back down here because I'm right here next to the Broward County Bus Terminal. I want to make sure that's really captured. So I've put my mark right in the middle of the downtown Fort Lauderdale Mobility Hub. And so moving down here, it asks, is this project at or within a candidate hub location? Well, you may say, I have no idea what that is. So what you can do is you can right click, you can open a new tab, and it's going to pull up a map here for you. Let me get that here. And what it should pull up is the candidate hub location map right here. And so from this, you'll be able to pull up and see where your proposed location is, and is it within a proposed candidate hub location map. So right here, you'll see the downtown Fort Lauderdale hub. It's showing on the map. So it's telling me it's urban core, it's a rail station. So moving back into my application, I'm going to do urban core rail station. And that's how you'll know. You may have a location that's not actually part of that, but if not, just leave it blank. Moving down here, we move down into the facility owners. I know that the City of Fort Lauderdale and Broward County are impacted, so I'm going to include them. And so down here, it asked if you have resolutions of support. And as I mentioned before, we have the sample resolutions of support. I'm going to say, yes, we do. Now down here, we talk about spanning multiple jurisdictions or multiple facility owners. I know that we're impacting Broward County as well as City of Fort Lauderdale. I've selected yes. And then moving down, we ask about whether or not the facility owners have provided a resolution of support. You'll need to answer that. If not, you'll need to get one from them. All right, so moving forward, again, this again asks which phase you are applying for. We're doing design and construction. We're moving forward with that. Now you get into the document upload section. So again, there's a lot of text here. I won't necessarily read all of this, but just a few points of clarification. You are limited to 10 megabytes per file per question. So if, for instance, you have files that are way over that size, you should reach out to me at my email address here, and I can provide a link to a file transfer site where you'll be able to upload that additional documentation. So please read through all of this text. It will explain exactly what you should do, and it's fairly straightforward. But as you start going forward, here's where you'll start to upload your files. So for the purpose and need, I've already created files for this. So I'm going to go ahead and upload my Mobility Hub purpose and need. So there's that. Is there any supporting documentation for that? Well, of course, I have that as well. I have supporting data for my purpose and need. I'm going to upload that. Moving through this, I also have my project area map. I'll upload that. And then as you go through, you'll just continue on down, uploading the various files. And so you'll see there's quite a few. The required files have red asterisks next to them, and everything else that isn't required does not. And at this point, I will turn it over to Benjamin Restrepo, who's going to explain how to complete the Fdot cost estimate form that you will upload to here. So bear with me while I stop sharing my screen, and we'll let Benjamin take over.
Good afternoon, everyone. Benjamin Restrepo with Broward MPO, I'm part of the mobility team, and I'm going to help Chadwick here explain the cost estimate form. Just let me know if Chadwick, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so what I have on my screen right now is the typical Fdot LAP cost estimate form. This form can be found on the web page that Chadwick showed earlier for project information. So if you scroll to the bottom of that web page, you'll see a little tab that says cost estimate form, and you would be able to download the form from there. So the first things you need to know about the cost estimate form is you need pay items, right? Or products that you need to estimate cost for. So that's where you see here on these first two columns here, right? You have a pay item number, and then you have a pay item description. The pay item number is a number that Fdot has for any type of work or item that's going to be done on a construction project. To the right of your pay item description, you'll see a quantity. So this is where you'll go and estimate the amount of a certain product that you're going to be estimating. This column next to the quantity is unit. This is a type of unit where it's, for example, for sidewalk, you may have it as linear feet or square yards of sidewalk. It depends on how you're estimating your pay item description. The engineering costs, that will be the unit cost, dependent on the type of unit. So again, if it's sidewalk, then for example, this may be like $40 per square yard. So then this will become your engineer's subtotal cost would end up becoming your engineer's unit cost times the amount of quantities you have of that pay item. So this column over here, the FHWA participating items, are the pay items that are eligible for funding for projects such as Mobility Hub projects or CSLIP projects. This column to the right of the FHWA participating items are the ineligible items. So that's for anything that goes above and beyond the things that Chadwick listed earlier in his presentation. And then the things that aren't eligible for funding, those would have to be paid for by the applicant. And those would mostly have to be done on a separate project, because as Chadwick explained, with Mobility Hub, you have to follow strict federal guidelines. So we don't want to mix the two and then not be able to meet eligibility requirements. All right, so I give a little description about what the columns are. So now we'll give a little description or how to figure out what your pay items are going to be, your pay item descriptions, and then what number is associated with each description. So what you end up doing is you'll go to Fdot's website, Design Quantities Estimate. And here, this website will give you the basis of estimates and your chapter index of all the different types of pay items you can find on Fdot's website. If you're completely lost and you don't know exactly how to find a pay item, you can go to this tab here that says Master Pay Item List. And once this finishes downloading, I'll show you how to use it. Okay, here we go. For example, sidewalk. If you're trying to figure out the pay item for a sidewalk, you just go to this description tab here, type in sidewalk, and then come over here and hit apply. After you hit apply, you'll get a bunch of different things that list sidewalk in the query. But then you'll just scroll down and see which is really the pay item that I want to use or what is it that I'm trying to really quantify to later be constructed. So if we scroll down, here's this one pay item. This is a typical sidewalk that's 4 inches thick. You'll notice here that here's the description of the pay item. You'll have your units, which is in square yards, and then you also have your pay item number. So to fill out the cost estimate form, you'll just grab this, hit copy, go back to your Excel sheet, go to your pay item description, paste it in, and then just go back to the website, get the unit, copy paste, well, not in quantity, in unit, and then also with the pay item number as well. So after you're done putting in your different pay items, your descriptions, your numbers, your units, now we need to figure out how much each of these items cost. So then that's when you go to a different website on Fdot's historical costs and other information website. Here in Broward County, we are in area 12. So if we want to figure out the current 12-month moving market areas, Broward County would fall in area 12. So we'd go to either the PDF or the Excel sheet. If you're not able to find any of your pay items in this area 12, you feel free to go to the current 6-month moving statewide average or the current 12-month moving statewide average. You probably will be able to find a pay item in one of these two if you're not able to find in area 12. But when you're filling out your cost estimate sheet, try to stay consistent. If you start with area 12, use area 12 for all your cost estimates. But if you went with area 6, I mean not area 6, if you went with current 6-month moving statewide average, stick with the 6-month statewide average, and the same goes with 12. If you chose one at the beginning, try to use it for the entire section. So we'd open up the link for the area 12. Got to go back to our pay item number. Pay item number was 0522. So the easy way to do this is just Control F and then type in 522 and 1. There we go. So 05221. Make sure that the description matches what we have on our cost estimate sheet, which is concrete sidewalk and driveways 4-inch thick. We'll just go back to the sheet to make sure. Concrete sidewalk and driveways 4-inch thick. So the description is the same. We'll just highlight the entire area. The weighted average is 39.73. So we'll just go in into the engineer's unit costs and type in 39 point, what was it, 73. And then from there, we'll type in our quantity. So we'll estimate, just for example purposes, 100 square yards. The Excel sheet already has built-in formulas. So you just have to type in the quantity and the unit cost, and then it would spit out the subtotal for that pay item. So instead of filling out the entire Excel sheet, we'll kind of speed it up a little bit, and then we'll go down to the bottom of the estimate sheet. Fdot in-house design support. Here you can estimate your design costs for the project. I typically would like to recommend you use 20% of your total construction costs. So, or not total construction costs, but funds for construction. So your funds for construction, for example, ends up being $1 million because that's the minimum we have to hit for a mobility hub. You can type in here, 200,000, and that would be 20% of your construction cost. Other things you would need to fill out here is definitely the CEI cost. That's also self-formulated. So it would be 3% of your funds for construction. The only reason why there's 119 right here is because we didn't put in all our construction or pay items here. So as the pay items increase here, this number gets larger, and the CEI will also get larger. As far as maintenance of traffic and mobilization, you follow Fdot standards for that one, 10% for maintenance of traffic and 8% for mobilization. This area right here is actually very, very important as well. Funding for contingency. There's always unwanted experiences that happen in construction, so definitely set a pot of money to the side for those issues. 20% is pretty high, but it can be higher or less. It depends on your experience working in your city and working with lab projects and figuring out how much it's going to cost you to fix surprises that come up during construction. So yeah, we have our funds for construction. And then once you add those up with the FHWA non-participating items, so we'll just type in something here just so we have, there we go, type in $100. So we have $3,973 and another $100, and you'll get your subtotal. That's both of the participating items and the non-participating items. So then this would then become your funds for construction, right? Once you add in the design, the CEIs, and then any other of the things listed here, you'll have your total construction cost estimate. Your $1 million minimum is not going to be based off of the total construction cost estimate. What it's going to be based off of is the subtotal of funds for construction. So that's really, really important to remember. To meet the eligibility, the minimum $1 million requirement, that's based solely on funds for construction. That will not include the cost for design or CEI. After you're done filling up the top range of the cost estimate sheet, it's very important that the cost estimate is signed and sealed by a professional engineer. So you will have to put in the PE's number here, the name of who prepared it, the signature of that person, the date, and then also if it was reviewed by another engineer, just type in who reviewed it, and then the responsible charge will be the one that ends up signing and sealing the cost estimate sheet. And that's all I've got for now. Chadwick, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Benjamin. And so at this point, let me share my screen. We're almost complete here. One second here. We bring back the application. All right. So we'll say you've gone through and you've filled out everything. I'm just gonna add some files real quick so it'll allow me to advance to the next page. As I had mentioned, everything that's required, there is an asterisk next to. So these, all right, here we go. All right, and so the next question is, we talk about whether or not the applicant understands that the minimal asset useful life standards need to be observed. And so I've spoken about that before. We're going to say, yes, we are prepared to maintain these assets for their useful life. Down here, there's a box to talk about community support for the project. And so here you can talk about any community support you have. Sorry, it should have been filled out. It's a required field. So in order to move forward, we'll just type something in. And then this last question talks about many of the things I talked about, the DBE goals, the Title VI, the Buy America requirements. You are just saying that, you are familiar that these will be required of you as the applicant. So we'll go ahead and say yes there. And so at this point, you are at the home stretch. Congratulations for sticking it out. You will say that you agree and you will hit the submit button. And once you hit the submit button, you will automatically, you'll get an automatic generation. An email will pop back to you saying, thank you again, you successfully submitted your online application. And if you require a copy, at that point, you can reach out to me and I can supply a copy to you of that. But that's essentially how the online application process will work.